In today's show, we're talking all things Mikal Bridges. Anfernee Simons and that number 3 pick. That's right. It's another trade episode, and I am joined by Doug Norrie of Locked On Nets. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, or if you're lucky enough, you're listening to another episode of Locked On Nets. Today, we're talking all things Mikal Bridges, all things Anfernee Simons, all things the number 3 pick. That's right. It's fake trade season. We've made it to the world of fake trades, and I am joined by co-host of Locked On Nets, Doug Norrie. Doug, how you doing?
Oh, buddy, the best time of year is when we can speculate on all these things that can maybe happen for these two teams. And in a world where the most crazy thing can happen going both ways for both these teams, I don't know if we've ever been in like quite this kind of situation with where things might land between the Blazers and the Nets.
Yeah, truly like a 4-lane highway. Everybody's buzzing by in both directions. So we will get into all of it today. I think the crux of why we're here, why we've joined each other today, is because there is like obvious link between interest for the Blazers in Mikal Bridges, and now Portland has the number 3 overall pick, which that is a really enticing thing that they could trade to the Brooklyn Nets. And to make it work, Blazers almost certainly, we'll talk about it, but almost certainly have to include Anfernee Simons. So before we kind of get into the deeper specifics of that trade, and I try to pitch you on taking a worse package, what are the Nets trying to accomplish, right? They have taken such a major pivot over the last 4 months, particularly for my listeners, like what's the Nets' goal this summer? And is there pressure for them to go in one direction?
Yeah, I think this is like the hardest thing to probably drill down on right now in Nets world is actually this very question: is what are they trying to do? It's not exactly clear. I think on a high level, they are one, and this doesn't necessarily help with trade season. They're trying to I think, distance themselves from the previous superstar era, right? Like to get as far away from the KD, Kyrie, Harden thing as possible. And trying to trying to establish an air of just sort of functionality and consistency that the team really hasn't seen in a long time. That makes it hard to know sometimes if they're going to make the best basketball decisions or best long-term decisions. So I know this is like a roundabout answer to say there's no answer. I'm not exactly sure, actually. And I think this is where the Nets land in this really interesting crossroads, why we're doing this crossover to begin with, right? It's like, the range of outcomes here is so wide that I actually don't even want to pigeonhole into and say, oh, I think they're trying to do this, because I'm not exactly sure. But I do think there's a level of consistency they're trying to maintain. And I also do think there's a world where, on the one hand, they wouldn't mind continuing winning because they have incentive to do that now without their picks. And then there's also a world where I think if you gave them truth serum, they'd say a reset doesn't look too bad, but that puts us in another sort of version of maybe inconsistency when it comes to the fans, and the optics behind that might be rough. So look, that's a really, really wide range of outcomes. We're getting to the specifics. Does that make sense? Does that make sense though? Like what I'm saying? No, it's really hard to pigeonhole.
Right. Because they don't control their picks, right? Like for the most part, their picks are owed to other teams. So being really bad is not super valuable because you can't tank the way the Blazers have perfected it, which is just lose like so aggressively. It's just a beautiful, just really fun basketball. Strong recommend. But you can't totally bottom out without getting some draft capital back, which they could. But even if they do, it's not going to be their pick, so they're kind of out of their control. Right. So it's like, do we want to just be kind of good for a little bit and then hope we can make that move? And like, they are kind of good. The roster's a little weird, but they got a bunch of good players. Doesn't make a ton of sense, but it's like they have like 8 or 9 legitimate NBA players. And that's more than I say the team that I cover could say.
Yeah, they can't do the Skylar Mays, Jonathan Williams kind of like end the season, Jonathan Minaya, and like, hey, who's getting 35 minutes tonight? Like this is going to look, I know these guys you've never heard of. but welcome to 40 minutes of these guys every single night on the end of the season. No, they can't take that route, which I was jealous of the Blazers for going so boldly there. But no, that's not a realistic outcome.
Yeah, and so now they right, it's like they're trying to maybe go the middle path, but there's obviously directions you could go on either side. I wonder. So you guys, I listened to your show. As soon as the Blazers got the number 3 pick, you were eyeing that thing.
Yeah, for sure.
You were on there by yourself. Like, I saw the solo show. He said, "Listen, let's talk about it." How long have sort of in Nets world have you been envisioning a swap with the Blazers, and why does it appeal to you?
Oh, it's funny. It was right there. It was really right in that moment. I did think they were perfectly positioned to, if they spiked a high pick outside of the Wemby pick, that there was a world where it was like, oh, the Nets could consider this, and the Portland considers, because Dame, obviously, it's like your listeners know, he's on record basically saying he's not interested in it, right? Not interested to go into the 19-year-old route.
Yeah, he said no more 19-year-olds. Like, he said it really specifically. He said that route is not my route. So the Blazers are incentivized to get good, right?
Right. So like going right out there, right after the lottery, when they spiked that pick, it felt very obvious. But honestly, it wasn't even reporting from Nets world. It was just like reporting around obvious land. Like, obviously the Nets should start thinking about this, because it's not even coming from inside sources. It's like, hey, this is an obvious basketball move. They don't control their own picks, but this is a way to get a high draft pick to begin resetting things. Like, you could maybe get another couple talented guys back into this thing. Bridges' overall value is probably never going to be higher than it is right now. Like, I can't imagine coming off the playoff run and the end of the season run. I don't think actually a full season of Mikal Bridges would actually raise his value. I think he's really, really good, but it's hard to imagine him getting more valuable than he is right in this moment. There's almost just no way. He was just that good, right? A year older, a lot more miles, an injury, who the heck knows? But it does offer like this one unique moment for the Nets to, I think, try to capitalize it. I do worry though that, what do you think about this? Because, it's not the same thing as Dame, but it's interesting when you become sort of like the face of a franchise. I do think there's an extra, and I think Bridges is already there, honestly, for the Nets. Like, there's this extra layer of value that you can't really even tap anywhere in the trade market, right? Because it's like, hey, this guy's so valuable to us. He's valuable beyond basketball. He represents who they traded for KD, like all this other stuff. Like, do you think, like, if you look at it from the outside coming in, do you see that as an inhibitor to making a trade? Because I think we're going to talk about like what specific packages would look like, but there's this other like sort of non-basketball functioning thing here that I worry block it. That would make you think irrationally. And maybe you want to disagree with this, because I think the Blazers have thought irrationally about the Dame situation for a long time now. But I get it, because he's so loved. So I'm not bashing him for it.
And he's like at worst, like the second best player in franchise history. So
I get it. But I'm saying that, like, if you gave a lot of people truth serum, I wonder if they would have moved that. You know what I mean? Like, there's just other basketball. There's sometimes just other than basketball things kind of crop up. And I get it. It makes sense.
I think from the Nets perspective, there is an optics too. And I think you hit it there. It's like, we traded this. This is the prize for Kevin Durant, right? Like, this is the sacrifice of all these things. And it's like, now we move off him and we end up with better be something good. Like, whatever finishes that sentence better feel like, okay, yeah, it was worth it. Or it's like, damn, because the Nets do have a small history of having some trades that seem that you look back in and people get frustrated about. We won't rehash them here, but there were some in the past, that big blockbuster trades that felt that, Bobby Marks gets teased about all the time. Yeah. So it's like, like, I think there is an optics perspective part of it. And I think there is a like, hey, we want to, I think there's two things for someone like Mikal Bridges and the Nets. It's like, we don't want to get fleeced here. And for the Blazers, it's like, we want to do right by, like, if we end this era with Dame, we're not going to send him to hell. Like, we're just not going to trade him to OKC or whatever. Like, we're going to do right by him because he's done right by us and all these things. It's almost the reverse. I want to ask you about your perception of Anfernee Simons, and also of who you prefer at 3. But first, I want to ask you what kind of shirts you wearing?
Oh, the shorts right now, baby. The Bird Dogs. These are the easy. When these things came in the mail, our friends over at Bird Dogs sent out the little welcome pack. They have actually not left my waistline and my legs since they came in the mail. They are about as versatile as it gets. I don't know about you. I live really close to the beach. I know when it comes summertime, these things are going to be able to go into the water, out of the water, no problems. Stretchy fabric makes even these legs look great, which, if you live in my house, is no easy feat. The Bird, I cannot really sing the higher praise of Bird. If I stood up right now, which I will not do on the podcast, you would see the Bird Dogs with the interior lining hugging these trunks right now. All you got to do to get yourself some Bird Dogs, and believe me, once you do, you will not take them off, just like I haven't. birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. You enter the promo code LockedOnNBA. They're going to throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti style tumbler with every order. Cannot sing the Bird Dog praises high enough. If you're going for something that looks great, if you're going for versatility, if you're going for fit, they have you covered. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA and enter that code LockedOnNBA. You'll get that tumbler with every order.
All right. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of this a little bit, and we can kind of bounce back and forth a little bit. But the package, I think, that makes sense for these two teams, if they're to do business together, is something centered around Anfernee Simons and the pick. Kind of. I don't even think I think that anymore the more I dig into this, but we can argue about that in a moment. But I'm wondering, before we get into that, what is your perception of Anfernee Simons as someone outside the market? Because, I think that is a big part of this trade, because to make the money work, the Blazers don't really have other salary that is appealing unless you want Yusuf Nurkic and Nazir Little, and that feels like not enough. So what is your perception of Anfernee Simons?
Yeah, look, I mean, undersized guard, good on the ball, really good shooter. I would be fine. It's like a guy that you like to root for. I doubt you want to build your franchise around him. The contract looks pretty good. Again, it's like you can probably see what the ceiling is. I get why he would come. I mean, there's a lot of reasons he would come over. The money matches really well. The youth, he's, obviously, the Blazers people know this forever. It was like kind of buried for a long time. You hear talk of him coming.
He's
gonna be amazing. And then, by the way, he was really good. Like in those non-game minutes, he earned every bit of the money. I don't think it's not like a franchise altering move. Obviously, it's more of like a money matching. We get someone in that can play 35 a night and you're not gonna be like so frustrated with it, but it's really kind of fodder for whatever the other draft capital that you're getting back is, right? So Anfernee Simons, fine player. I mean, I think he was like negative EPM this year. It's not amazing.
He's struggled on defense. He's never really figured it out.
And look,
not a great playmaker.
Hard, and it's gonna be hard if you're paired with Dame to have like an amazingly defensive backcourt with those two guys. There's nowhere to hide those guys at that point, right? So I think that's probably a little bit part of it, but I'm fine with it, but that would not be the part that excited me about a trade. Like the part that excited me about the trade has to be Shaedon Sharpe. It has to be like the number 3 pick, who's probably, probably not Scoop, but who knows? You know what I mean? So I get it on Simons. Where do you stand on Simons? Does that seem like a fair assessment, outside the market? A point of honesty, I probably watched him play 12 times this year or something.
Yeah,
like
right.
You know what I mean?
They happen late at night. We're recording this pretty late at night, and this would be tip off for the Blazer game. Right. I would say he's probably an above average starter. I would probably rather have Anfernee Simons. I would rather have Anfernee Simons than say Jordan Poole. I think you could argue you'd rather have Anfernee Simons than Tyler Hero. There's pretty comparable players. It's just you got to get them on the right role, right? Those two dudes are 6 men. They come off the bench and they're microwave scores off the bench. Anfernee Simons is a starting shooting guard, and if he becomes the centerpiece of a trade, it's centerpiece of the trade for Tyler Hero, which is the piece that Miami fans want to trade for Damian Lillard. So maybe people value that pretty highly, but I would say he's probably an above average starter. I don't shooting guard is such a weak position. So saying he's one of the top 10 shooting guards in the league is duh. Right. It's there's not that many. But I think you're right in general. He's not a franchise player. I think here, in Portland, in this market, I'm lower on most than Ants, and I still think he's really good. The numbers without Dame suggest that he's a legitimate starting point guard in the league. but it's just not to me, it's not a sample that I would bank on, just because if you've watched the minutes, some of them came when they were horrific, or like just giving him the ball and saying, you literally get as many pick and rolls as you want to run. Like, it wasn't highly competitive basketball. It's been clear that the Blazers are going to trade for Damian Lillard's good friends, Mikal Bridges, or want to trade for their, good friends. Dame's like sitting courtside in Brooklyn, and from your perspective, he's either recruiting Mikal Bridges or he's shopping for a new house, depending on who you are. And like, at that point, it's like, well, if they get the 6th pick in the draft, Ant plus the 6th pick to me is okay. Now that it's 3, it feels like a pretty serious overpay, because to me, the difference in like one of the Thompson twins or Jarris Walker versus Brandon Miller, or it's like, that seems like a big jump. What is your perception of the 2 young guys that might be available at 3 in terms of like franchise cornerstones?
Yeah, I mean, either one. This is where it becomes really interesting, right? Because, and this is frankly the only reason we're probably talking about it, because I think with either between Scoot or Miller, and it's probably Miller at this point, right? Like, right. I think that's probably where it's trending. I think that this is where like the Nets could begin to forego. This is what makes it realistic to me. This is where they can forego the tanking piece of it, because those guys are so good that it's like, yeah, it's going to hurt to tank. They're not going to tank, but like to not be that good, to maybe not to make the playoffs, to have that unprotected pick go out to Houston. That is not going to feel amazing, but you are getting a legit top 3 pick. Like, this is a strong draft, and these are 3 top. I mean, Wemby's out of it. Like, these other 2 guys are legit. Like, they would go other years, they would go number 1, right? Like, so I think that you can feel pretty good about basically getting essentially like a number 1 or number 2 pick, because you're backing Wemby and I'm out of this thing because you're just like so generational. I think you can start to feel better about it. But I wonder if like the draft capital for the Blazers, like you said, it's an overpay for Bridges. Like, because at what point, like, okay, so do you think, actually, I'll just ask you this right out. Do you think the number 3 in Simons for just Mikal Bridges, that's it, that's the whole deal? Do you think that's an overpay for Portland?
Yeah.
Like, just, you do.
But I also think they've backed themselves into a corner where they have to overpay, because what they're doing is they're trading to keep Damian Lillard on the team. They're not trading to get Mikal Bridges, right? They are trading to keep their franchise icon on the team, because if they don't do this, like if they don't make this move, Dame's, I don't know if he's going to walk or whatever, but he is going to, you are starting the process of him being gone, and it's just, when does it happen? My guess would be it happens this summer. So I think it's an overpay. I think it's a straight up is going to be a bad deal, but I kind of think they will from the Blazers. Like, I'm merely a man with a microphone, but from the Blazers perspective, I think they will strongly consider it because of the position that they're in.
So you know where I make this, like, you phrase that really well. It's almost analogous to the Kawhi PG trade,
100%.
In that you're like, when it's like, oh, they gave away so much for PG. It's like, well, no, they gave all that away for PG and Kawhi. Right. Like, I know Kawhi wasn't like attached to the deal when they sent it into the league office, but like it was the same thing as he might as well have been. Like, he might as well have been a part of the paperwork, because that wasn't happening without it. When you phrase it like that, if you already have walked down sort of like the primrose path of like keeping Dame, then at that point, if you're bottling them all together, then it is all part of the deal. Then it's like, oh, it's the number 3 and Simons for Mikal Bridges and 3 more years of Damian Lillard, if that's what you really want. And then it's really funny too, because I think that like this all goes back to what I was saying before about like making basketball decisions around non-basketball topics. Like, cause that's what, like, this is, and you box yourself into a really, really weird spot with this. Like, because I guess in a second we'll talk about going the other way. Like, if Dame does kind of jump, and like if the Nets can give enough back to make that worthwhile. But I'm right with you that it probably feels like an overpay. Some people in the Nets would see it as an underpay because they love Bridges. This is the craziest. If it sounds like I'm stumbling, it's only because I really believe this is like one of the craziest situations. Like, it's unbelievable that we're even here, and it's not totally clear like who would get the better of this long term or short term.
Yeah, a lot of it depends on on 3. Like, if the draft prognosticators are right, and you're trading for like for Brandon Miller, like a 6'9" dude who could play 2, 3, and 4 and defend it all, it's like, well, I think we just got a Mikal Bridges, right? Like,
That's
I think
what
we
I was just going to say that. Like, you maybe just got a 19-year-old Mikal Bridges, like,
right.
or better, like, or maybe better. Cause like Bridges is not exactly so young. And so, yeah, man, this is like, it's such a crazy spot. I really knew this was a really interesting deal when, and almost never use this as the temperature taker around something that, whether I think that we're like living in the world of rationality, but even doing those podcasts right away about that, like, made up deal 3 pick and then throwing it on Twitter, it really was completely split right down the middle of what people thought was good or bad. And like, no one was too mad about it, but no one was too excited about it. And everyone was kind of like shrugged their shoulder and said, yeah, we should do it on both sides. And I was like, maybe this is just the world where it's going to happen, because everyone kind of has resigned themselves that it's like not the most amazing thing, but it might be the lesser of two evils for everybody. I don't know. I think that's that's sort of where I've ended up making my mind about it.
Yeah. So from the Blazer fans' perspective, they want Nick Claxton to be involved. Yeah. And to make that happen, it's like the Nets would have to take Yusuf Nurkic back. Not a great contract, and like a fine average to slightly below average center in the league. But like, is there a world? I can tell by your reaction that you're not into it, but is there a world in which the Nets say, okay, if we're going to make this trade, let's really shift. Like, let's go to the next era, because we're going to trade Royce and we're going to trade Dorian Finney-Smith and we're going to look different. Do you think there's a world in which Mikal kind of opens the floodgates and that somebody like Clax, who's really good, is going to would be on the table?
Ah, man, it's so hard. This is where I actually really hadn't entertained the Claxton side of this too much, just because I just didn't think that would be even the route that they would go. If it was like Bridges and Claxton, I just think that's probably too much. Like, you'd have to probably at that point send back Shaden.
Yeah,
it would
and
be,
they're not gonna. They don't want.
And they're not going to do it,
right?
And they're not, because Claxton is really good. He's not like a swing generational talent kind of good, but he's in an amazing contract right now. So is Bridges. Like, these are amazing contracts for these guys. They're relatively young-ish. They probably have another level, or at least Claxton does. So I think you're probably getting too deep at that point to probably really consider it. And it's all these moves actually is like what makes me worry that the Nets, and I don't think, and again, I think the optics around it end up being so rough, because it's like, oh my gosh, they finally developed a guy in Claxton. It's like, they're going to trade him. They just did this with Jared Allen, right? Like, they finally developed a center, and then they just shipped him around the next, playing out of town when Harden came calling. So I don't think they would end up going there, but I understand why Blazers fans would want to throw it in there, because he's good and he's young, and you want to put all the pieces around Dame, and I actually think he would be a really complimentary piece with Dame. But but he's probably just too valuable at this point.
That was my guess too. So the Blazers don't have this. The sweetener that they have is too much. Like Sharp, Simons, and the pick is all your assets. Like, you can't put them all in. It doesn't make sense. Okay, so you mentioned it. The Nets want Damian Lillard, right?
It seems like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate to sound disappointed by this, because I think, and stop me if this goes too far, I sometimes I worry that saying you don't want somebody sounds like you're anti somebody, but it's not true, right? It's like, or even like talking about trading Bridges, like, oh, you're anti Bridges. Like, I'm not. I'm like pro rationality, right? Like, I'm not anti these players. I'm pro rational behavior, or upside behavior, or whatever. I think that the Nets probably really want him. I think he represents the kind of superstar that they kind of missed out on 3 times in a row, right? With the guys that wanted out of town. He checks every box in terms of like culture and community, and I mean, just talent. He's amazing. Like, he's an all NBA point guard. Obviously, he's one of the I know people have put him up there with Curry at times. Like, he's great. Like,
I mean, he was arguably the best point guard in the NBA this season, right? Like,
of course. Yeah.
Like,
he's amazing. Nothing to do with his skills. It really mostly has to do with like the $63 million in 26-27.
Hey, listen, it might only be like 58.5, because the cap might not go up as high as they think it's going to. It might only be like 58.5 million.
Even the 58.5 and 25-26. Like, you're headed for a cap. And the Portland's headed this direction too. You're headed for this like really weird possible Wild Westy cap situation coming out in the next couple of years where it's going to be like the last thing you want is bad money tied to the top of your payroll for guys that you can't win the championship with. That actually might be the worst thing you can do to your franchise. Like, and no one exactly knows how this is going to play out, but I would guarantee what you do not want to have is very like 35% of your cap or whatever into a guy that can't get you all the way there will be actually the worst organizational decision you can make. And I'm really worried about that. I said this on yesterday's podcast. Would I love to root for Dame for like 1.5, 2 years? Yeah, that'd be great. He's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty fun to root for. Yeah.
It's super fun to root for. It would make the team really exciting. And I just think it would be almost like malpractice to do it. Right, from an organizational standpoint.
Beyond your own skepticism, which I think is pretty rational. And I think it's shared by some people here in the Blazers fan bases. They're like, oh my gosh, are we going to get caught in this and pay Dame $60 million when he's 36 because of loyalty or whatever? Do the Nets have a package to make it work? Like, what does it look like? Obviously, the problem is you can't trade Mikal Bridges. That's who you'd want to trade for Dame, right? But Dame isn't going to Brooklyn to not play with his homie. He's going to like that. That's part of it. So like, what does a Nets package even look like? I guess if they were to go down this route, and I will say, I have heard pretty vague whispers that even when I pushed back against, didn't get much stronger. That the Nets are, if the Blazers go this way, the Nets are a landing spot that would be of interest. So I think. Not that there's interest.
You mean that would be on like his preferred list? Like, is that what you mean?
Dame wants to be in Portland. He wants to make it work and all of those things. But I think based on where they are now, I've heard from one person specifically that thinks that Brooklyn would be a place to keep an eye on.
I think that one thing that might save the Nets from not trading for him is that their package just isn't sweet enough. Like,
that's kind of what
like I think that's actually the one thing that might stop it, because like, I think you're right. I think that the tea leaves all seem to be there that he probably would want to come here. He's friends with Mikal. Like, organizationally, I think it's fine. Like, the New York City, whatever, all the things, I think it's fine. I actually think, almost thankfully, the Nets don't have enough to give. Like, what can they give? Like, Claxton, that's not going to look good enough probably on paper. Matching the money would actually be pretty tough here. Like,
the money is the problem, is that it's like, it has to be Ben Simmons.
Because I'll tell you here's what you don't want to hear. The guy who starts matching that money is Ben Simmons. And I don't think you can be an organization that goes from Dame Lillard to Ben Simmons as like your highest paid players.
Unless he's going to medically retire or whatever, unless he's going to show up here and be like, I don't want the money, but if you're the GM, you should
just trade yourself in the deal, because like you're never gonna make it. Like you're never gonna make it. So I think that like they don't have enough of their own picks. They had the Phoenix picks are gonna look really good in the future, probably a few years out. They have some of their own picks left, but not really, and they're pretty far out. Like, they just don't have enough. I just don't see how, if there was really any kind of bidding war, that like I don't think they can match it enough. And like the only guy that you can really send back is Bridges. And at that point, like, what are you doing it for? So I think that
it's like you could sign and trade Cam Johnson or whatever, but that doesn't even,
not
what
enough.
Is right. Like, what does that appeal to them? Some kind of Royce and Dorian Finney-Smith. And it's like, it doesn't, what it would need to be is that the Blazers here's the path, right? Draft night comes, the Blazers are trying to make this trade. They're like, oh man, Ant and Anfernee Simons and 3 is too much for Mikal Bridges. That's like, for us organizationally, we're uncomfortable with that. Those are like blue chippers in our mind. The Nets say, okay, fine. Like, we're happy to hang up the phone and like roll along with Mikal Bridges. We're happy to have him on the roster. Damian Lillard says, yo, what the? And because now that they have another 19-year-old and they haven't done what he very, very specifically and very publicly has wanted them to do, he says, okay, it didn't work. I've appreciated my 11 years here. Year 12 is not happening. I would like to be traded to the Brooklyn Nets. Not, I would like to be traded. I would like to be traded to the Brooklyn Nets. Then you start to get into a package building. But even then, it's like, do the Blazers say, sorry, we just can't do it right now? Like, we can do it later on.
I think they'd have to do like the KD thing. They had to do this, the Kevin Durant thing from the previous summer, where they just say, I appreciate that you want the trade. we absolutely under no circumstances can send you to with the packages that are being offered. Like, it's just like, you can't, like, there's just, that's organizational malpractice. We can't do it. Like, you're under contract for a long time. We love you, but it's just not good enough. The Nets, for a proxy, the Nets just did this with KD. Now, eventually Matt Ishbia came in and, backed the truck up. But like, at the time during the summer, they just honestly said, the packages stink. Like, we can't do it. You're Kevin Durant. And I think that the Blazers, at least, I think from that perspective, I think they at least have something they can look over and say, hey, we saw another team, how you do this. Like, you just say, hey, give it a try. Let's get to the trade deadline. Let's see where everyone is. That's basically what they did with Durant. Like, it was like, there was like this, like, behind closed doors handshake agreement. And we knew this at the time. We called it. We're like, they just agreed to kick the can down the road 4 months. Like, that's all. That's all they did, right? It was like, no one get too comfortable here, because like, if this goes bad, he's gone, and that's exactly what happened. I think they would have to do the same thing with Dame, because you'd have to just wait till see what happens. And then, like, hey, look, if the Nets stink and they want to reset it, and at that point, it's like, maybe something happens then, or I don't know, but I just don't think it can happen. I just don't think the Nets package is good enough. Now, if they hadn't traded, the Harden package would have looked good enough for Dame, but they don't have that package anymore.
Right. Let's circle back real quick. I'm offering you, I call draft night, I'm offering you 3 and Anfernee Simons for Mikal Bridges. That's the deal, straight up. You taking it right away?
I probably would not take it, but I would, it would be really, really close. Like, I think I would think for a long time. I would put my time chip on the table and say, like, I need a few extra minutes here. I do think at that point, it's like really good, but the trade Bridges with what he means for the franchise now, it has to be great. Because they just don't have to trade him. You know what I mean? They have him under contract for a long time. They don't have to do it. And because they don't have to do it, I think they need to be in bowled over territory. And I just don't think that's it. And I think that's, I'm going to add in my own little organizational optics piece to it and say, they don't need to do it. And most other times I probably would have said yes to that.
Yeah, that's I think for Blazer fan perspective, that's good to end on, right? It's like, this deal that on our side of the continent, it's like, no way, crazy overpay. There are further considerations from the net side. It's like, I don't know. Is this what we're up to? I think it's why these deals are tough. And it's why part of me thinks like this is going to get dicey for the Blazers. They're going to have to make an overpay somewhere, because if they want to keep Dame and they want to do like I said, like if they want to make the trade that keeps Dame, they have to overpay in order to keep him. And if other teams are getting cold feet, then your need to overpay gets even louder and brighter and all that. So
it's just what happens. Like, it happened with the Suns. Like, they just ended up needing to overpay, and they ended up putting Bridges and Johnson and all the unprotected picks in it. Like, this is just the situation you box yourself into at some point, and it can kind of stink, and sometimes it's worth it because, like, you love Damian Lillard. I don't know. It's a hard situation.
It is. They found themselves in a funny spot. Doug, this was a whole bunch of fun. Thanks for joining the program, and thanks for having me on Locked On Nets.
Awesome, man. Yeah, appreciate it. Hopefully, maybe we'll be talking soon again if we're doing a trade reaction piece.
Exactly. So I'll talk to you in about a month from today. Dear listeners, come back for more shows next week. It's What We Do, 5 days a week, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.